When my father-in-law passed away, my lazy husband inherited $75 million, or at least he thought so, and immediately threw me away like trash. He laughed savagely, shoved me out the door, and spat out cruel words. "Now you're nothing! I don't need you anymore, you useless woman." But when my father-in-law's lawyer walked in, his face turned deathly pale. "If you've ever been treated badly, ever been looked down on, ever thought you had nothing left to lose, then this story is for you. Are you ready? Don't forget to comment your feelings below to let me know. You're truly useless. I don't need you anymore, you useless woman." Mason's voice echoed through the living room of our house in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as he violently hurled my suitcase down the front steps. It hit the concrete walkway with a dull thud, the zipper popping open slightly, spilling out the pile of clothes I had hurriedly packed. I stood there completely stunned, watching my 10-year marriage collapse in just 10 brutal minutes. My face was still hot and soaked with the tears that had been falling ever since he started throwing my belongings with the eager enthusiasm of someone finally clearing out unwanted clutter that had taken up precious space. My name is Evelyn Harrison, and at the age of 37, I never thought I would become homeless simply because my husband suddenly decided that he was too rich for me, that I was beneath him, that I no longer had any meaning in his life. Theodore, his father, had died just 3 days earlier after a long battle with failing health, and Mason was acting as if he owned the entire world and everything in it. "Now I'm rich, Evelyn! $75 million!" Mason shouted joyfully, his face flushed with excitement as he stood at the door with his hands on his hips, wearing a triumphant expression. "I don't need some pathetic waitress dragging me down anymore. I'm going to live like a king. I'm going to have the life I've always dreamed of." His cruel voice cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. For 10 exhausting years, I had worked 2 shifts at Rosie's place to keep our family financially afloat, while Mason bounced from one part-time job to another, constantly saying he was finding himself, or waiting for the right opportunity that supposedly matched his so-called talents. I paid the mortgage every month, bought all the groceries for the household, and even paid for his car whenever his work was unstable, which honestly was most of the time. I had been the backbone of the family, the responsible one, the adult in the relationship. "Mason, please," I whispered, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I bent down to pick up the suitcase, my dignity shattering on the concrete along with my clothes. "We've been together for 10 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" He laughed, a hoarse, raspy laugh that made my stomach twist violently. "That just means I wasted 10 years being held back by someone who was never good enough for me. Theodore always knew I was destined for greatness. That's why he left everything to me. He believed in me." As I stood on the sidewalk, watching him close and lock the door that had been our home for so many years, I felt something inside me break beyond repair. But it wasn't just heartbreak, sadness, or even shock. Something else was smoldering inside. I suddenly remembered the first time I met Mason 10 years ago, at a small job networking event in downtown Fort Wayne. The room back then was packed with young, ambitious faces, everyone carrying business cards, dreams, and carefully polished success stories. I came only because my mom had said, "Maybe it'll open another door for your life." I remember standing in the corner with a glass of cheap wine in my hand when Mason appeared beside me, as naturally as if we had known each other for years. "You look like someone who actually works for a living," he said, smiling a very charming smile, too smooth for me to be on guard in time. "I'm Mason, currently taking a break from work, but that's my choice. I have to take care of my dad." He told me his mother had passed away early, that his father had been sick for years, that he had put his career on hold to stay with his family. In a room full of people showing off new cars, hunting for high-bonus jobs, or talking about how to enjoy life, his story of devotion softened me. When 3 hours later he still remembered my name among dozens of people, when he brought me another drink without me asking, when he repeated exactly what I had said about how hard it was to find the right job, I thought I had met someone who truly knew how to listen. My dad built his whole company from nothing, he told me at coffee the next morning. But he taught me that money isn't everything. When family needs you, children have to show up. At that time, I was 26, freshly out of school, just beyond the protective arms of my parents. I was far too ready to believe in a beautiful story. Mason's energy, his confidence, even the way he turned long-term unemployment into a pause to prepare for the future, strategy, added a bit of color to my dull life. Only later did I understand that behind that story of devotion was just a man who lived entirely off others. And when I met Theodore for the first time, 6 months later, at the dinner where Mason finally agreed to take me home to meet him, the old man's eyes rested on me for a long time, both gentle and heavy at the same time. Theodore always treated me very well, clearly even better than he treated his own son. The times Mason was absent, the envelopes of money he quietly pressed into my hand, the vague reminders that, "My dear girl, you must know how to keep a way out for yourself." All of those were warnings I failed to understand properly back then. My relationship with Theodore was one of the few bright spots in my increasingly unhappy marriage. While Mason treated his father like an inconvenience, like a chore he had to endure, I genuinely cared for the old man and enjoyed his company. After Theodore's first stroke 2 years ago, I was the one who took him to physical therapy 3 times a week when Mason was too busy playing video games or scrolling on his phone. I cooked his favorite dishes: beef stew with carrots and potatoes, homemade chicken soup, the German food his mother used to make, helped him organize and follow his complicated medication schedule, and spent hours listening attentively to his stories about building his construction empire from nothing. "You are a good woman, Evelyn," Theodore said to me just a week before he passed away, his voice weak but sincere. We sat together on his back porch, watching the sunset paint the Indiana sky with beautiful streaks of orange, purple, and pink. Mason was inside the house, probably on the phone as usual, deliberately ignoring both of us. "You remind me so much of my wife, God bless her soul. She had the same genuine kind heart, work ethic, and loyalty." I smiled warmly and gently patted his work-worn hand. "You don't need to thank me, Theodore. We are family. This is what family does for each other." The old man looked at me with sharp blue eyes that age and illness still had not dulled. "Family isn't always about blood, my dear. Sometimes it's about who shows up when it matters. Sometimes it's about character." At the time, I thought it was just the wisdom of an old man reflecting on life and relationships. I never imagined those words would become prophetic in a way I could never have foreseen. Mason's attitude toward his father's failing health had always filled me with embarrassment and shame. He constantly complained out loud about the smell of medicine, the inconvenience of doctor's appointments, and how Theodore's presence interfered with his lifestyle and restricted his freedom. More than once, I caught Mason rolling his eyes in clear annoyance when his father struggled with simple tasks or needed help around the house. "Why doesn't he just go into some nursing home?" Mason grumbled to me after Theodore had an especially hard day following his second stroke. "I'm not a caregiver. This wasn't part of the deal." "He's your father," I replied, truly shocked by his heartlessness. "And this is his house. We're living here only because he was generous enough to let us stay after you lost your job for the 3rd time." Mason shrugged with complete indifference, then went back to staring at his phone. "But because of him, you lost your job too, and now your income isn't even half of what it used to be. Whatever. Once he's gone, this place will be mine. Then we can do whatever we want with it, maybe sell it and move somewhere better." The memory of that conversation now feels like a dark warning. Theodore had witnessed his son's indifference with his own eyes and had clearly drawn his own conclusions about Mason's character and worth. When I think back to the moment I walked into his bedroom, I can still see the old man's expression when he accidentally overheard Mason say those heartless words, even though he never spoke out or directly confronted his son about it. Now, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a cheap motel, staring at the $43 in my wallet, literally all the cash I have left in the world. I wonder whether Theodore saw something in those final months that the rest of us missed, whether he knew that the money he would leave behind would be squandered by his own son. The funeral was held small and simple. Theodore didn't have many close friends left alive, and Mason's behavior throughout the service was truly disgraceful and shameful. Instead of mourning his father or showing any sincere sorrow, Mason kept checking his phone and whispering to his brother Wyatt about the inheritance they believed would be valued. "I heard my dad's construction company was valued at $60 million last year," Wyatt whispered during the eulogy while the pastor was speaking. "Plus the house, the land, and all those investments." Mason grinned like a child eager for gifts on Christmas morning. "I'm thinking about buying a boat first, maybe one of those big yachts I saw in Miami last year. And definitely a new car, maybe a Porsche." I was deeply embarrassed by their behavior, but I was even more unsettled by something else I noticed. Gregory Rodriguez, Theodore's estate attorney, kept glancing at Mason with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't grief or pity. It was closer to disapproval, mixed with a clear sense of anticipation, as if he knew something the rest of us didn't. After the service ended, Gregory approached me with genuine warmth and kindness. "Evelyn, I'm very sorry for your loss. Theodore often mentioned you in meetings. He cared about you a great deal." "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. He was a wonderful man. I will miss him terribly." Gregory nodded solemnly, then glanced at Mason, who was discussing vacation plans with Wyatt near the parking lot. "The will reading is scheduled for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. Please make sure you're there." Something in his tone made me pause. "Me?" Mason said the lawyer told him it was for family only. Gregory's expression darkened slightly. "Theodore specifically requested that you attend. In fact, he insisted on it." As the guests began to leave, Mason was busy playing a voice recording about asset liquidation and researching tax issues related to large inheritances. I caught him typing, "Miami beachfront condo over $5 million," into his phone browser. Theodore's body had just been buried, and his son was already spending money that existed only in his imagination. Only moments later, Mason had contacted 3 real estate agents, scheduled a call with a property lawyer he found online, and started researching Lamborghini dealers. I stood up to say goodbye to Theodore's friends while Mason paced behind me, loudly talking about investment opportunities and diversifying his portfolio. His voice grew louder as more guests left, promising investments and partnerships that would become reality once his money cleared. 70